So, I'm still not going to be talking about Danganronpa for a little while to come, but I never said anything about fan games now, did I? The crew over at Project Eden's Garden, a popular and highly anticipated Danganronpa fan game, were kind enough to get in touch with me several weeks back and make a pretty generous offer. Number one was that I got to play the game's demo, which contains the full prologue, a full week before its wider release. And the second was that some members of the development team itself graciously agreed to do a little interview with me and answer some questions about the game itself, the creative process, and other interesting tidbits that I found incredibly fun to go over. I'll be going over my thoughts on the demo here firstly, and then swapping over to the interview content afterwards, so timestamps will be available for those of you who are more interested in one part than another. This part of the video, focusing on my thoughts, will have full spoilers for the prologue itself, while the interview portions were all recorded prior to me actually playing it, so it will not have any to speak of, or at least on the audio side of things it won't. With that all said, let's get right into it, shall we? The game stars Damon Maitsu, the super high school, ultimate debater. Sorry, force of habit. Besides, all of the characters in this are in college anyways. Weird to review one of these types of games but have English be the original language it's written in. No localization gripes in sight. Well, anywho, Damon is, self-confident would be putting it pretty lightly. He's very different from your typical Danganronpa protagonist and has his fair share of antisocial, even pretty rude tendencies. My first thought playing as him really was that I kind of felt like I was playing as the love child of Togami from DR1 and Erika from Umineko. However, this isn't a complaint, because I definitely sense that he's going to have some interesting development moving forward, especially because he's prone to at least want to help when things go awry. Speaking of going awry, yeah, the game opens with him receiving an invitation to the prestigious University of Eden's Garden, which is said to pick only the best of the best ultimates from society at large. He's pretty excited to finally share some space with who he thinks will be his intellectual equals, but quickly after boarding the train, he sees that they're all anime characters and gets sad. He doesn't really have any room to argue though, as they're very shortly after gassed to sleep and transferred to a mysterious place. I assume this is probably a reference to the originator of the killing game genre, that being Koshin Takami's novel, Battle Royale, which has a similar start, with all of the students in the story getting on a bus to go to a field trip and then being gassed to sleep before they're transferred to the island, where they're tasked with killing each other. When he wakes up, he's in some kind of dank little generator room with Iba Tsunaka, whose talent isn't actually revealed until much later, but is the ultimate liar. Hers is just about the most abstract of the bunch we get, and while I do question the practicality of having someone be recognized for something like that, there's a bit of intrigue there revolving around whether, well, she's even telling the truth about it or not, or what its application could mean in the long run. She's seemingly very cold and blunt, but she also tends to make surprisingly funny asides, which breaks the veneer of her stoicism ever so slightly, and I find that relatively charming. It very much gives me Kirigiri vibes so far. She attests that they've both been knocked out here for a bit, and while she did check out some of the rooms down the hall, she didn't check far. Furthermore, they both realize that they, along with everyone else we meet from here on, have been decked out with Electro ID-style smartwatches which administer a controlled shock every time you try to pull it off, so that's no good. They both also realize there's a vent that they can peek through where they can see another room where someone is apparently passed out, so now would probably be a good time to check on that. Seeing as this is the first time we get to explore in first person, I think this would also be a good time to credit this game's presentation. The 3D environments are all very solid. The controls, while having their own unique quirks, approximate the original games very well, and both the character art and UI are very good. The difference in fonts throws me off just a little bit due to my muscle memory, but it wasn't really anything worth complaining about, and everything looks so professionally put together that I'm honestly very impressed. You rarely see so much attention to detail and visual cohesion in projects which are purely voluntary because, well, you know, usually you have to pay people for this kind of stuff, and it can be difficult to muster that kind of work for a fan project which you won't be able to make any money from, but damn did the team really pull it off here. Even the transitions and little sprite flourishes are spot on, and the CGs are absolutely no slouch. This prologue honestly had way more of them than I'd have expected, but they were very welcome additions. Anywho, in this place that looks a bit like a dining hall and a kitchen area, they meet another pair who were apparently knocked out together. That being Grace Madison, the ultimate golfer, and Wolfgang Akire, the ultimate lawyer. The former is loud, abrasive, and rude, a bit like Iruma, but with more of a fixation on sportsmanship and less of one on being ridiculously suggestive, thankfully. She's still got quite the colorful language and makes little effort not to chafe up against people's nerves, but I'll take that over that plus leering any day. The latter is honestly a pretty sweet guy, a little withdrawn, but ultimately not very stuffy despite what you might assume from his profession and professionalism. He can get a little bit heated later when it comes to doling out due justice, but so far he's relatively reasonable and friendly and seems like the kind of person that's easily gotten along with to me. I can definitely see him being a core ally moving forward, but, well, we'll see how that goes. You never know who's safe with these games. Eavesdropping on their conversation was also Toshiko Karuya, the ultimate matchmaker. I could have called her a gremlin if Grace didn't beat me to the punch, but actually she's fairly tame, all things said. One might assume from her attire and stature that she'd invoke similar traits to Saionji, but she's really got no mean streak to speak of. She can be a little huffy and commanding, but at the end of it all, she seems pretty good-natured, and obviously takes a large interest in conducting social groups in a way that's pleasing to her. She's also the youngest here, which seems to imply she's probably extremely gifted to have wound up in a college much earlier than many of her similarly aged peers would, but she doesn't elaborate on this quite yet, so I'm interested to see if maybe in the future we'll learn a little bit more about that. Either way, she seems pretty eager to get us to meet everyone else, who she apparently already has, and leads us out of the building for the purpose of doing so. This is where I have to make 3 little notes. 2 are just teeny tiny criticisms, while one is well, it's probably just on me, to be honest. Firstly, in the 3D sections, I've noticed that when you mouse over either a character, a door, or an object, you have to get really close for it to register. This isn't a huge deal or anything, but compared to the original games, you definitely have to be way more right up on something to get your mouse to be like, oh yeah, you can click on this. Secondly, there's no actual dedicated option on the game's menu for the purpose of window size or changing from full screen to windowed. Thankfully, you can use Alt plus Enter to window the game, so there is that, but I think actual in-game options for this would definitely be a bit more user-friendly and flexible. So those are maybe some tiny things I'd suggest are worth tweaking for future releases. Lastly, when you exit into the outside area, and again later during the non-stop debate gameplay, my recording software just lagged like crazy on these parts, and I'm not really sure why. I could record the original games and the rest of this game's gameplay just fine, with pretty minimal staggering, all things said, so I'm not sure if this is more of a me issue related to my PC, or if there's some kind of optimization hiccup happening here. At the very least, it didn't affect the game itself on its actual window, just the recording. Either way, to prevent you from feeling a little sickly looking at choppier frame rates, I'm gonna do everyone the courtesy of presenting these sections through stills rather than traditional gameplay clips. Apologies for that. Anyway, outside we get a few notes of interest. First of all, the azure blue sky above is concave, which seems to imply it's a big rotating projection on the wall, which, gee, does that remind me of anything? Second of all, we meet a couple more characters here. Meekly hiding away at first is Eloise Tullner, the ultimate fencer. She seems genuinely pretty sweet, but she's also obviously terrified of the situation and more than a little unsure about how to proceed with any of it. She seems like she probably struggles socially, so I'm thinking already of how much she'll be permitted to come out of her shell as the story progresses. After her is Desmond Hall, the ultimate marksman. He's quick to assure that he's got far more interest in stationary targets than moving ones, and he otherwise seems pretty down to earth and friendly. He's cooperative, nice, and fine with clarifying things to assuage any worries the others might have about the implications of his talent, so in my book he seems pretty cool. He doesn't seem to have that much fondness for who he apparently woke up alongside though, saying that his energy was just a bit too much, so naturally we're gonna have to figure out who that is, right? Well, thankfully for us, this leads us to the central building with a big false tree, which is sort of our little meet and greet area for the rest of the characters we haven't met so far, so let's run down the list and give our thoughts on them all, shall we? Jean de la Mer is who Desmond was telling us about, and he's the ultimate ship captain. He's resistant to the label of pirate because he swears by a policy of not crime and pillaging, but rather a simple love for exploration and adventure alongside any motley crew he can assemble. He's boisterous, loud, but also very outgoing. He seems like his temper might flare a bit easy under the right circumstances, but no pun intended, I can't see him steering us wrong, so to speak. Ingrid Grimwall is the ultimate blacksmith, a somewhat stern but nevertheless sugary sweet lady with quite the noticeable southern accent. She values hard work and the homemade over the corporately manufactured, and though she can give an air of motherly disappointment when she doesn't like how things are going, she seems pretty thoughtful and protective as well, so you know right away that I love her. On the other side of the spectrum, though, we have Winona, the ultimate entrepreneur. She's about as typical billionaire as you can get, carrying a posh sense of self-confidence and antisocial smugness that you can just feel radiating off of her. I have absolutely no shame in saying, however, that she is very pretty, and she is probably my favorite. What can I say? I always love mean girls, no exceptions. You're not allowed to judge me because I admit it to myself. Also, it's particularly hilarious to see Damon monologue to himself about how abrasive and snooty she is when I'm like, dude, she literally literally acts the same way you do. Please, sir, develop self-awareness. Cassidy Amber is the ultimate pro gamer, who has, first of all, an immaculate sense of style, a niche that she's carved out for herself, and all the eccentricities that come with the profession, as you'd expect it. She also does huge charity stunts too, so I guess she's kind of like Mr. Beast. But also she hates the rich and works to frequently redistribute her wealth, so despite some semi-contradictory lifestyle choices, she ultimately seems pretty base to me, not gonna lie. She's also just energetic and fun and makes game reference jokes that I don't find invasive or annoying, so that is a huge plus in my book. Jet Dawson is the ultimate drag racer, a thrill-seeking party man who, while he doesn't necessarily seem to retain information for very long, or very easily, definitely makes a pretty strong first impression by being so over-the-top and sociable, whether you'd prefer him to be or not. He's pretty much forever wearing his big dog-eared motorcycle helmet too, which is a charming character trait, and he also laughs like Scooby-Doo? I have no idea why he does this, but I can't stop thinking about it. He's been trying to prod an introduction out of Mark Bursky, the ultimate music producer, while he's at it, but he doesn't seem to have had much luck until we weigh in. Mark is extremely withdrawn to the point of barely saying much of anything at all, and seems pretty down on his own musical talents as well. It's a little funny how his moniker is Mayhem, despite the fact that in person he's remarkably quiet. I'd say he's probably my least favorite so far, but not by virtue of any flaws necessarily. I just really haven't seen enough of him to feel like I have much of a grasp on his character yet. Well, competing for his place might be Kai Montiago, the ultimate influencer, though. Kai is, well, he's friendly on a surface level, but he also seems awfully vain and also very cowardly. He's hosted the most extreme freakouts and self-centered traits when the going gets rough, and while I can't necessarily blame him considering the situation he's presented with, I can say that he gets on my nerves. Well, I like his design at least. He's very cute. Shame about that personality, though. This isn't a knock on the writing, however. He's written perfectly to be what he is. When I initially saw the reveal trailer, I kind of assumed that having both a pro gamer and influencer would have some strange overlap, but honestly, he and Cassidy could not be any more different, so that was also interesting to see as well. Second to last, we have Diana Venetia, the ultimate cosmetologist, who, can I just say, has probably my favorite character design so far? I guess that stands to reason given her profession, and the fact that she apparently managed to rise in prominence in the film industry based on that alone, which is hard enough for people who don't work backstage, but I think it's worth really putting a spotlight on. Personality-wise, though, there's not much I can say about her quite yet, beyond the fact that she's very nice, which, you know, never a bad thing in my book. And she also, later, has more of a tendency to focus on the emotion of different circumstances, so there's also that tidbit to maybe take into consideration. But I don't feel like I've seen her more unique quirks in action as of this point. And last but not least, we have Ulysses Wilhelm, the ultimate historian. He's a little haggard, having less than optimal sleeping habits, which, yeah man, mood. So he's constantly taking notes about more incidental things to keep them in mind. Pretty much all of his actual brain storage space is taken up by history, obviously, particularly because he finds it important to keep in mind the adage of learning from it for the purpose of not repeating it, a philosophy I can definitely admire. Otherwise, he's a little socially awkward though, which, yeah, being bookish tends to do that to you a lot of times, but I think he's got a good head on his shoulders nonetheless. And with introductions done, we're called back to the building we came from by a mysteriously posh but menacing voice on the intercom. What he calls us over to look at is a murder? Holy sh— oh wait, false alarm, it's actually a dummy. Made to look like a real murder that once happened! Man, my guy, you can't keep throwing me through roller coasters like this. He basically demands we hop right to investigating it, otherwise we're not really getting anywhere anytime soon. And while I do think everyone, barring those who are too shaken up by it to stick around, are perhaps a little weirdly cooperative here, it is at least a fake murder scene, so it's certainly an interesting way to kick things off. The victim is a girl named Kara, who was apparently stabbed some 20 plus times in the chest and also had traces of chemical burns on her head despite having strangely clean hands sans the blood under her nails. Near her corpse is the apparent murder weapon, a knife, and an assault rifle, and in the closet behind her there are a couple of details of note too. There's an empty bucket that smells of bleach, a container near the back that has bleach taken out of it, and a ladder near the door. Or is it a step ladder? Cassidy gives a little spirited argument about this for the moment, which, no shot, is this literally an Ace Attorney reference? In my Danganronpa fan game? I love this. I truly love this. That's actually all we have to look at though, because afterward we're called back to the tree by the voice on the intercom to look for an elevator, which will apparently take us to a class trial. One statue mechanism discovery by Grace later, we hop in the elevator underneath what the voice calls the Tree of Ignorance, and get started debating the case. This basically acts as a truncated mini-case for the purpose of tutorializing the class trial gameplay itself, while cleverly avoiding the pitfall of actually having to kill off one of the central cast to do so. One of the few things I think you could definitely levy at the start of most Danganronpa games is that while the class trials are large gameplay draws for adventure game fans, it takes a while to get to them for the first time, considering there's never a trial before the end of Chapter 1. This game, by contrast, uses this mock-up trial for a dummy to not only give the player a taste of this gameplay style before the prologue is over, but also naturally tutorialize it early on into the game so that they won't feel lost or blindsided much later down the line, and I think this is an incredibly clever move. Not only that, it also plants some seeds of intrigue because the fact that the case is said to be at least based on something means it could have some kind of later significance, especially if our unseen mastermind knows about it. Well, Grace doesn't seem to share my enthusiasm, but she kinda gets herself zapped into temporary silence for it, so c'est la vie. The voice over the intercom clarifies that if we hop to it, he'll let us out of this place, so we might as well, right? The case is pretty cut and dry. The killer ducked into this room and set the bucket of bleach on the door with the stepladder. Then they got the girl's attention somehow, led her to the room, and dumped the bucket on her head. With her eyesight impaired by the chemicals, leaving her disoriented, she wasn't able to use the gun she had, for whatever reason we don't know yet, to defend herself properly, leaving the killer an open opportunity to stab her. She did briefly try to claw at the killer with her nails, leaving the traces of blood under them that she had, but this still proved ineffective in saving her life. All throughout this, Wolfgang definitely becomes a bit more verbal and even passionate when discussing the matter, but Damon is predictably a bit less charitable. The gameplay mechanics work about as you'd expect here, with one cool addition in the form of Pathos, which is kind of like a mixture of the Absorb mechanic from DR1 and SDR2, and the white noise from all of the games. Instead of absorbing certain highlighted statements from people, you can absorb their stray thoughts to use as truth bullets, which I find very inventive. I think it has a lot of potential, mechanically speaking. Another little thing I'd say is that while the presentational elements are awesome here and all pretty much spot on, the one I'd say maybe needs a bit more work is the way your truth bullet shatters a statement. In the original games, this was accompanied by a loud cracking and bursting sound with light effects and freeze framing, while here it just kind of slides through the words with a smaller noise for this sort of thing. I think having the animation for this be a bit more bombastic would help sell the triumph a bit better and ultimately make the presentation stronger, but for a game with such impressive presentation all around, this is ultimately a pretty small potatoes issue in the grand scheme of things. Just, again, something I'd maybe suggest looking at. The climax inference sections also make a return, and they're basically like V3s, but a little bit easier to see, so no complaints there. The art's also incredibly well approximated in that style, so very good job on that. As the class trial ends, we meet our villain, a fellow in a goat skull mask by the name of Tozu, who's just as bombastic as you'd expect. I honestly find him pretty compelling on his face, too, because he's not just a mascot stand-in like Monokuma, he just is a guy who's here. So obviously he's not one of the students. That makes me really wonder about his motives, his methods, and how he's related to the narrative at large. It's the little things, you know. He very quickly clarifies that he only promised to let us out of the room we're currently in at the end of the trial and not the premises, and announces the killing game we're all expecting. Grace tries to divert tradition for a moment by literally beating the shit out of him, but when she's quickly sideswiped by a bullet grazing past her cheek by Tozu's enforcer Mara, she obviously has second thoughts about that plan of action. Wait, enforcer? Oh my god, there's more of them? He has helpers? Wow, this is incredibly intriguing, actually. Who are these people? I want to know so bad. Thus, with distrust building and Damon himself having built up enough frustration to earn himself a scowl from everyone else when he tells Wolfgang that he's naive and that barely anyone here has a talent worth a damn anyway, we've set the stage for Project Eden's Garden, and its demo comes to a close. I think this is an incredibly impressive effort all around. The characters are unique, well-designed, and fun, not to mention incredibly well-performed. Like, seriously, props to the voice acting team, they did a fantastic job all around, which is something I'm always glad to be able to say with fan projects. The aesthetics and overall presentation are spot on and fittingly atmospheric in a way that sells the setting perfectly. The 3D modeling, while obviously not AAA budget, is doing a lot of good environmental legwork here, and generally all of the UI stuff is a sight to behold. So much here is done in its own unique way, but also approximates the original DR game so well that nothing feels at all out of place. The gameplay mechanics may have a few little hitches, technically speaking, here and there, but they all also do a really great job of mirroring what we've come to expect and work very well. The writing also is awesome so far. The characterization is well considered, the pacing is brisk but not overeager, and the idea to slap a trial into the prologue for tutorializing's sake but also doing it in such a way that doesn't ruin the story or bog down the runtime is honestly kind of an incredibly impressive feat that I'm gonna be thinking about for a long time. That is a hard first showing to top. This all carries with it such a distinctive Danganronpa-esque vibe while also avoiding the more common DR writing pitfalls that honestly, I'm more than a little excited for this, especially because while I was playing, I had the realization really hit me that I didn't know what was going to happen. I know the other DR games like the back of my hand, but here and now, while I have speculations to consider, I'm writing blind. I love these characters, I know I will hate to see terrible things happen to them, and I'm intrigued by where these plot threads are going. And for the first time in a long time, I don't know the answer to those questions, and it kinda brought back to me how it felt to play the original games for the first time. I'm honestly really impressed and excited about that. I think if you need any kind of testimonial worth considering from me about the game itself, then that's the one you'll want to remember. There is so much here that makes me want to prod the team's brains about it, and while obviously I can't get spoiled, I could at least thankfully see what they had to say about some of my preliminary curiosities, so why don't we take a listen to that conversation, Alright, so hi, this is sort of an informal interview with some of the project leaders on Project Eden's Garden. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Hello there, guys. My name is Shade, or aka Kelvin. You usually can refer me to either as, but I'm the producer of Project Eden's Garden and also do some technical stuff behind the scenes and the marketing.
And hello, I'm Suzy, and I am the creative lead of the project.
So, I guess we should just go ahead and get started right away with the first question. So, starting off, when was the idea for Project Eden's Garden first conceived, and how long has it taken for the game to reach its current state?
We had, so basically the project was created around 2019, 2020, when we had like first concept of like basic character designs, and was usually a beginning of certain artists and composers that were commissioned at first to make like general concept of like Project Eden's Garden. So we had like specific character at the beginnings, and then also some certain like music pieces that were uploaded into the channel, and it basically moved over then to like a voluntary project after we made like the official trailer announcement of the entire project. And over the time, like over the past 2 years, people were recruited to work on it on the following months, which comes to us now today, in which we have a lot of people. I think about like over 50 people are working on it.
Oh, wow.
Including every kind of people about that, yeah.
Well, that's quite an impressive roster of people working on it. So, second question. Has the planned story or details surrounding the game's general vibe shifted over time? Have anything changed majorly since their first draft, or has the story remained relatively set in stone while being worked on?
Okay, well, I think I can answer this one since it's more story and writing related. Yes, there was no, but when the writers came on, there was no script story-wise, only a bunch of concepts, which is totally fine. And thanks to the hard work of the writers and input from other staff members from other departments, we were able to create a story out of what we had. And those aforementioned starting concepts either underwent significant changes or got archived. And when I say staff from different departments, I mean that we would get input from composers, we would get input from modelers. One of the scenario writers is also a composer because he was really into the plot and wanted to help us. Taka also wrote something here. They said, on several levels, the art, modeling, writing all changed. Before the switch in position, then Tako becoming director, it seemed as if there wasn't a framework that was followed for game development. Normally you would have a game design doc, general idea and direction of the story, and an art style mapped out. In Peg's case, the previous workflow didn't really consider direction, therefore the 3D and 2D art side lagged behind a lot. So Tako then essentially made a huge game design document in order to coordinate the 2D and 3D artists. There was also character-wise, there were some significant changes. Unfortunately, I can't go into a lot of them because they're extremely spoilery. but I will go into the non-spoilery territory as much as I can. The ones I think I can safely talk about are the fact that some characters had like nationality changes. So Grace Madison, the ultimate golfer, she wasn't originally envisioned as Australian, and Ingrid Grimwald, the ultimate blacksmith, was not originally envisioned as Southern, but we decided to add in those character traits over time because we felt that those just came naturally to the characters. Unlike Ingrid, Grace's accent was still up in the air for a lot of development. The only thing that ultimately confirmed it was her voice actor's casting. Her voice actress is LumiSao, and we held the project over on like a casting call club page, and we wrote that the Australian accent is optional because at the time we weren't sure if we were going to be able to find a voice actor who could mimic the accent because the accent is notoriously difficult to mimic. But LumiSao is actually Australian, so she was able to just naturally do the accent, and that's when we decided, okay, it's confirmed Grace is going to be Australian. But you'll see that a lot of these decisions are sort of made not in the moment, but they will naturally sort of like come into existence over time. And it's just a lot of these decisions just come from working on the project every day and seeing what fits and what doesn't.
Yeah, it's a very collaborative process making something this big, so I can imagine a lot of things would arise just purely out of conversation or excitement or ideas and stuff like that. As a voice actor myself, I can say that would definitely be a lot of fun to do. In terms of percentage, how far along would you say that the game's development is, roughly? Story-wise, script-wise, we have an entire script drafted for Chapter 1, and we're working on a skeleton for Chapter 2. So I would say, script-wise, we're like 30% of the way through the game. But story-wise, planning-wise, we know the whole game. We know the entire story from start to finish. Okay.
Yeah, and in terms of like technical development, there's like a lot of systems and like features we'd like to improve on, or like add to it. So we unfortunately can't really like dim it down as to like what the current status is. But I would say it is like very, very important to us that we rely on the feedback, seeing how like when we do officially release the prologue, what the community thinks of it, and how we can basically ride on like certain people, because in the end I'm not sure how like the team will develop in the next couple of months once we have the release, if we get like more people to work on it, or if we're going to shift on specific things. So basically I don't think it would take as long to develop another chapter, but I don't want to like set everything in stone, so that's something we might have to see for ourselves in the future.
Absolutely. Never know what hurdles might come along naturally along the process, but with this under your belt, though, it's at least, encouraging to think that, okay, we could do that again. On that note, actually, and you don't have to answer this if it's a spoilery question for any reason, but so is it going to be the same amount of chapters as your average DR game?
Yeah, there's going to be the prologue and then 6 chapters, yeah.
Okay, cool. Aside from Danganronpa, what other creative influences have really shaped the project into what it is?
Okay, so I saw this question and I was like, I need to ask, I want to actually just go around and ask the writers and Taco for their thoughts on this, because I thought that it's such a broad question that I may as well get from ask the writers and Taco to pitch in themselves. So I have a nice list of what they have all said, so I'm just going to read that out for you, if that's okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so Taco said, "For me, I look up to Your Turn to Die a lot as an inspiration. The community has so much passion for that project, And Nankidai, apologies for my mispronunciation, has done a terrific job being a sole developer. Another one of my inspirations is Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. The game hits so many emotional beats on every level. Moving into the writers, I'm going to start with Anthony Clement, or his screen name, Starlight. He says, I have a lot of influences. The most significant ones are Psychonauts, Critical Role, and a Huckleberry Finn. Psychonauts is an amazing example of how to write complex characters and investigate serious subjects in an engaging way. While I run D&D games and play them all the time, stuff like Critical Role has shown me that coherent, powerful stories can be built by multiple people. And Huckleberry Finn is a perfect examination of how narrative can challenge everything. Shout out, and I love this addition from him, shout out to Kingdom Hearts for also inspiring me to write for the first time, along with teaching me to not go overboard with story structure. So the next one is by Bukiko, and she says, I guess I would mostly say influences from the actual world around me and how I can transition the actions of other people I see into a fictional character. One thing I've learned since high school about writing is that people watching can be your best tool, since not only can it open your mind to character traits and actions, but to different ideologies as well. And that's actually the same for me in a way. My influences are very like sporadic. They're not necessarily from one piece of media, and that's because my influence work in much the same way as books here. The next is Flammable Liquid. He writes, again, sorry for the butchering of the name, Nisio Isen's way of writing dialogue heavily influenced how I approach the script and a lot of my prose. The way he can create interesting dynamics, tension, and intrigue through such otherwise mundane conversations is an amazing skill and a great lesson on how to write interesting and complex characters. I think once you've mastered the ability to allow a conversation about a rock to be genuinely fun to read, it's a sign you've created good characters, for the most part at least. Then we have Rebus, who says that Knives Out influenced how I write mysteries and stories in general. It's a really exciting story that makes the audience form many assumptions at the beginning and then slowly tears them away as the movie progresses. The pacing is also great. No scenes are wasted and every plot point that's established returns somehow. The other writers and I hope to write something that's just as consistently engaging. As for myself, like I said, I'm very similar to Brooke, that I take a lot of inspiration from real life, but I also must admit that I found this question to be really tough because Kodaka is actually my biggest inspiration when it comes to writing. And I think that's because I like the sincerity of his writing a lot, for all its flaws. His characters are extremely animated and quirky, and at first glance may seem really one note, but I feel that once you get to know them, they really start to feel like real people. Even the silliest characters are taken seriously to some degree. And I feel like Kodaka embraces the fun in writing, and he knows that the zaniest, most ridiculous seeming casts can still feel relatable if done right. And I think that really demonstrates that he has faith, not just in his characters, but in the audience's ability to dissect them. And I think that's a really healthy relationship to have with your audience. And it's definitely one I want to emulate with Peg, because I love fan feedback and I love reading fan theories. And I trust in the fans' ability to make sense of this work and read into it however they wish. If I were to name my influences outside Danganronpa, it would be media that I feel tackles characters in a similar sort of way. So Undertale, Doki Doki Literature Club, and regrettably Homestuck.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sorry, that was unprofessional of me. The moment you went, I was like, damn it.
No, it's game recognizes game.
And that's pretty much it then. Yeah, that was a long response, but I was like, this is such a good question. I want to get it straight from like the writer's mouths and Taka's mouth, like what inspires them.
In terms of like general creative inspiration, I would also have to go with similar visual novel titles, such as like, for example, the Ace Attorney series, mainly for how they designed their, for example, 3D games, like the later ones. And obviously, during the design process of other things, we also had like some kind of like references in it played it in as well, and hopefully you might as well. When you eventually play it, you will see those references, and yeah, we're basically very excited to see what you guys' reaction are.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm a huge Ace Attorney fan, definitely, so I'm going to be keeping an eye out for that stuff. Yeah, I played those games religiously when I was like in elementary, middle school. I kind of fell off with some of the later ones, but I've been meaning to go back. What about Danganronpa specifically made the idea of a fan work based around it so appealing? Was there ever any time where the team considered making the game a wholly original IP? Or are there elements so fundamentally important to the Danganronpa framework that it could never have taken any other form?
I guess it's just because it's basically the premise of it being of a killing game. Even other games like Your Turn to Die, Zero Escape and stuff have a very interesting concept that you have limited cast of characters with certain strengths and weaknesses, and trying to explore all of their areas to how they would react in such of a extreme scenario. And this is something that has been very interesting for me, since it's a very unlikely scenario, impossible scenario for real life scenario stuff. So, and you can also have it being displayed as such of a way that you probably don't know exactly what's happening. Or let's say if the premise of a DR game we would act it upon here is the same, you can write it down in many different ways, and even though the premise is so simple, the outcome can change every single time. And it also is for some people who worked on Project Ins Garden, when I started working as a 3D modeler at first, it was something of an interest of me, working also as well in the game industry, and having found this project with one of my favorite games, and actually making a fan project of it, kind of motivated me to do that stuff, because inevitably if the game comes out, I can show off to people, kind of as a portfolio for me, to see that I have the potential, or also as well the to do something to work in the game industry in the end. So yeah.
Yeah, this question's also a doozy, because there's just so much you could say. The part about what made the idea for fan work based on it so appealing, I think Shade put it really well when he described how it's an impossible scenario. And I think for a writer, thinking up what reasonably realistic reactions would be in an impossible scenario, that's a challenge, but that makes for a really interesting challenge. And I think that's why so many people gravitate towards it. When you asked were there any times where we considered making this a wholly original IP, yeah, there were times where we were oh, maybe we should make this an original game. But you followed that up with other elements so fundamentally important to the DR framework that that wouldn't be possible, and that is exactly the case. Because PEG will have class trials, will have the whole truth bullet mechanic, and if we wanted to make this an original IP, we could include the class trials, we could technically include the truth bullet mechanic, but that's a little, it kind of, at that point it's is this inspiration, or is this just flat out stealing? And we're not about that, because the last thing we want to do is to disrespect the original franchise. And that's why we eventually decided, and we decided this months ago, yeah, we are sticking to a fan game, because this isn't about profit. It's just about being respectful to the franchise and trying to recreate its magic. Yeah,
that definitely makes sense.
And there have been also many times before that people say, oh, are you guys going to make Accept the Nation and stuff like that, or I really would like to support this project, which we really appreciate people actually offering us money, but so as I said, we're a volunteer project, and we just can't like accept any kind of like donations, and we won't in any kind of like in the future, mainly because it's something that we strive for, making it purely out of passion, and that's what it's going to be like also in the future.
And that's probably the safest way to go about it too, just from a legal standpoint.
That also means we don't do any kind of like merchandise and stuff like that. So just making sure that this is also like being cleared out here.
Yeah.
I could just go to the store and buy an apple. That's my merchandise.
Oh my god, stop. So sorry that I spoke over you. I just wanted to mention that if anyone sees anything being advertised as like official Project Eden's Garden merch, well, we don't endorse that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course.
It's definitely an important thing to keep in mind. You know, so many things pop up on Redbubble every now and then. You have to watch out.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so this is definitely a good one for both of you. Who's your personal favorite character in the game?
Oh boy.
Shade, you go first.
Okay. So, actually, this is a very hard one, because it's kind of like coming of a stereotype. Like, the longer you are within the team, it's like they're all of you like your children, and you don't want to make favorites out of it. But if I do have to decide, and it was like something that I initially had at the beginning, it has to be my boy Jet. I love him, like everything, like from his quirky personality and how he's like displayed with this character, and how he's going to be interacting with the other cast members. I think a lot of people will like him, and he has become one of my favorite characters to this date.
Taco just wrote in bolded text, one word, Winona.
Yeah.
So that's Taco's response. For me, like Shade said, this is a difficult question because it's like asking a parent to name their favorite child. I guess I would say that Kai Montiago, the ultimate influencer, I'd guess I say that his dialogue comes the most naturally to me. He's like this, his demeanor is like this kind of like embarrassing teenage boy, and I find that very easy to ride. I guess it's because I feel that sort of person is something we've all encountered in our lives. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of real life inspiration to take from. But even then, riding him still comes with a slew of challenges because, like all the other characters in this game, I need to take into consideration how every single facet of his character, both subconscious and conscious, is going to influence the choices he makes and the words he says. Like, that's my job as a writer. I have to treat him as like a real living, breathing person, and people are insanely complicated. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's so difficult, because I see the Pegcast sort of as people. So it's like, who's your favorite person? Like,
Understandable. I definitely would have a hard time picking a favorite among all of the characters that I've made in my time, so...
I would have a question to you regarding that.
Oh, okay.
What is your favorite character?
Oh!
I don't know. I mean, like, so far I'm actually really intrigued by the antagonists.
Oh, you mean Tozo and Ma?
Mm-hmm. I really like their designs, and I'm just interested in seeing how they sort of contrast the typical antagonist role that we usually have in DR.
That's really interesting. Yeah, most people wouldn't come up with that as an answer. I like that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very interesting answer.
I think one of the interesting things about the original Danganronpa games is that there's always sort of a tense sense of mystery and dread surrounding the identity of Monokuma, because you know, obviously, that, I mean, you know, he's not really just like a bear. Like, obviously somebody's in control. So having somebody that's a little bit more directly out in the open while conducting things, even if, you know, they have their design eccentricities, is something that I'm really interested to see how that plays out. Are there any other fan Danganronpa projects which have inspired your own efforts? If so, what are they, and how did they inspire you?
First, I'll read off Taco's answer. They said that I'm honestly not too involved with the fans in the Fangan or like Danganronpa community, so no, I use my skills from the game industry and apply it to PEG. Similarly, I'm not too involved in the fan game community or Danganronpa community. I'm honestly still relatively new to it. I feel like I only really started becoming familiar with it last year, but I did ask the other writers for their input here because I think they have more experience in the community than me. And what they found, what they told me, and what I also sort of found myself was that there are two fan games that stick out to us the most. The first is, and I'm going to butcher this name, I always butcher the names, the Uzujiko Massacre, which is a smaller Danganronpa fan game run by one of the moderators of the Project Eden's Garden Discord server, Queen. That fan game has always helped me keep my head on my shoulders because I got to watch its development, and I feel watching its development was really humbling because it reminded me that at the end of the day, fan games like it and Project Eden's Garden are a collaboration of love between friends. And we shouldn't forget, like, our roots there. And I also want to give special mention to Kill Cure. Kill Cure was, like, the first Western Danganronpa fan game to gain major traction. And for that reason, I think it was many people's introduction to the world of Danganronpa fan games. If it wasn't for Kill Cure, PEG might not even exist. It was really fundamental to, like, the culture and history of Danganronpas. And Kill Cure, from what I understand, has had to face a number of roadblocks since its initial inception, but the team has never given up. They're still going. And I think that shows everyone that a project can rebound with enough time and energy. And I think creators everywhere, not even just fan game creators, but creators of any kind of like genre or media can learn something from that and take some positive inspiration from that.
And I would have to add that, especially in the case of like Kill Cure, for me personally, it was also like that different kind of quality that you would usually see like from fan projects, or like generally from fangame projects in general, because kind of like that sparked that there are actually talented people trying to make something really amazing in the style of Danganronpa or something similar to it, and which kind of like inspired me as well to, oh my god, I have to like be a participant in some way or form. So not only like as a person who really enjoyed the franchise, but also like as an artist and like basically a supporter of it, kind of like sparked also like my career of doing 3D modeling stuff. So yeah,
it's very interesting. I myself am not particularly familiar with a lot of fan Danganronpa projects, but have been recommended a lot of them since I talked about the series, so that's definitely one that's on my radar. I know that Danganronpa Another 1 and 2 has come up very often in my recommendations as well, so...
I mean, Danganronpa Another 1 and 2, they're also really good inspiration because they showed that a fan project can be finished.
Yeah.
And can have its story out.
That's always a really tough one, is finishing things like that. I know... Personally, my main fandom inspiration that I started off with was I hail from Sonic fandom, so seeing ongoing fan games that never get finished is something that I'm no stranger to.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also like that kind of like expectation that some of the people think it's like, oh no, that's another fan game. We have to wait for the next 5 years. And it's still surprising to me that once we like do like regarding our latest devlog, we showed like our current progress on what it is, and people slowly realize that we're actually taking it seriously on releasing like the prologue section of it.
That was for real?
Which was so funny to us, like seeing like the directions, like, oh my god, it's happening, guys. It's not 5 years, it's only 1 or something similar to that. So it was a very, very wholesome interaction regarding that. Time is like a very, very important resource to us, and Sometimes it's like very, very unexpected, because then it would like a simple task might take some days or like a week in order to be completed. But then there's like days, like for example, Soze and like another specific person in our team like doing stuff 20 different things in like a day or something.
Oh wow.
It's like a very, very interesting like dynamic that we have like as a team, and it's also like kind of like motivating, because if you can see that progress is being done, it also like motivates usually the other team members as well to do their stuff. So yeah,
I think that's probably one of the things that's most encouraging and fun about doing a group project like that, is getting to show your own progress to everybody else. Kind of helps creatively inspire those around you, because you want to share that with each other and be like, oh, look at how cool this is, I just finished this.
Yeah, because we have what we do every week is that we actually have like team meetings basically for that reason. It's just to show off what we've been doing every week. And I feel like, even though I personally can't attend team meetings because it's like 4 a.m. my time, and I love this project, but I'm not getting up at 4 a.m. for this stuff, I feel this team meetings are still a really good like confidence boost for the people who attend, which does a lot of the stuff.
Yeah, and it also helps out like basically coordinating with each other in like certain aspects, like when certain like people from the art team need assets to be made for the 3D modelers or something like that. When it comes down to it, you would actually know what kind of like status we currently have. I mean, we have like dozen of documents detailing every single like certain step that we need, or like things that need to be done and stuff like that. And if it weren't for this, I think we wouldn't have come this far, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. And I think actually the next question leads pretty well into this discussion. What is the hardest thing about coming up with a Danganronpa-styled story? What unique challenges have arisen from the framework itself that you might not encounter as heavily in different game projects? And I wanted to add to this and say this also applies to the technical side as well, with, implementing certain things.
Well, funny that you say that, because our lead programmer, Sweden, has written up a little paragraph going into the technicalities, the technical side of things, so I can just read that out. Mm-hmm. So he just wrote, developing the whole project in general was a challenge. We originally started with an early version of a VN engine called DR Editor, although a lot of front-end visuals mechanics needed to be programmed from the ground up. And the original Danganronpa games are more visually complex than other game projects, especially since they involve many visual details you wouldn't see at first glance, like the sprite effect transition. Shay, do you also want to give your input, and then I can give my input after you?
Yeah, and like kind of to add that to the technical side, I mean, you made like an analytic videos like 5 hours about that, so you you know what we're talking about. Like, there's a lot of detail that is being put on in these DR games that the usual player doesn't really see at first glance. And it was very important to us that we would like to incorporate that same atmosphere and these details into our game initially, basically. So that it doesn't feel like kind of like that weird section that something is missing, but you don't know what it's missing really. And in terms of like also creating assets for it, like since we're like developing all of it in Unity, we also had like the challenge of optimizing all our assets so that the game could run as optimal as it can without like sacrificing the quality of it, which is something that we have been trying to perfect there, so to speak. But obviously there will be some drawbacks, and we try to help out as many people as we can when we officially release it. But this is something that has been very challenging for us, but we managed to get solutions to that as well.
And for the writing side of things, where to start, am I right? I mean, mysteries in general are already like a doozy to write. There's so many. What I found with writing mysteries in general, like these like murder mysteries, because I've written other like dear like fanfics before, without fail, there's always going to be one super important detail that everyone is going to overlook until like 2 months before it comes out or a month before it comes out. And someone's going to notice and we're going to be like, oh my god, how did we overlook this? This is such a huge issue. Without fail, like you just, there's so much that you almost can't anticipate. When you like write a mystery, I feel like you yourself are solving it. That's how I've always felt when writing mysteries. I don't feel like the game master or whatever. I feel like I'm the characters themselves trying to figure out what the hell is going on here. And it's challenging, but I think that's what makes it also so rewarding. That in and of itself isn't necessarily unique to Danganronpa, since that's just mystery writing in general. When it comes to Danganronpa, I feel like there's a certain way that the Danganronpa characters are written. Like there's a certain just way, like stylistically, and I think trying to emulate that in a natural way is very difficult. What helps me is that I have done DR fan works before where I write in the style of it. So, I'm also a side project of mine, a passion project is an SDR2 AU where Mahu Kazumi is the protagonist, and I've got the whole script for that, and I just studied how SDR2 is written and tried to emulate that as best I can. So that's helped me a lot with Peg. But I've noticed that other writers still kind of might struggle to properly emulate the style. I just think that's probably one of the greatest difficulties when it comes to wanting to emulate another media property, because it's like trying to emulate another artist's art style. There's so many intricacies at play, and if you don't do it right, it can seem kind of off-putting or almost uncanny, along with creating zany characters, but trying to still make them feel like real people. Yeah, trying to display the nuances of them, but in a way that's subtle and doesn't beat the audience over the head, but still, wanting to convey their zany side in a way that doesn't beat the audience over the head. There's a lot of trying not to beat the audience over the head, trying to get that middle point, that right spot where it's subtle enough but not too subtle. That's that can be very difficult as well. Mm-hmm. For if there's any MK2 fans listening, that's the reason I've been very quiet on that front. Blame Peg. It's Peg's fault.
Koizumi's worth it. What elements, if any, of traditional Danganronpa games have the team been trying to either get away from or improve upon?
So, the goal wasn't that Project Eden's Garden isn't trying to one-up the DR games. I believe we have similarly answered those questions that you already asked us. That it's more of a love letter towards the franchise, and we try to incorporate the elements of the original games that we believe are best of how the DR Danganronpa art style and design have been portrayed there, and using these kind of elements to Project Eden's Garden as well. I mean, there were, let's be honest, there are some quirky things that were added also in the past games. Obviously, we're not trying to one copy those things. It's more that we either incorporate them as references or trying to make it more enjoyable for the player to experience when they inevitably play the game.
Yeah, because going off that, I've noticed, at least in kind of the fangirl sphere, that there's almost this expectation that if you're making a fan game, you have to try and outdo DR. It's a competition with Danganronpa. And I just disagree with that mindset. I don't think that's a healthy way to approach fan projects. At the end of the day, we're all doing this because this project resonated with us, and I think we need to stay humble and recognize that for all its flaws, this project did inspire us, and that instead of going out of our way to better it, we should go out of our way to acknowledge that we're inspired by it, but also I'm not saying to not acknowledge its flaws, because goodness gracious, DR has a lot of flaws, and truthfully, there is stuff that you would see in the DR games, perhaps can sometimes have quite the amount of, innuendos and such. You're not going to really be seeing that in Project Eden's Garden. That's not to say they won't exist at one point or another, but they definitely won't be as hand in. I mean, I can already say that when you complete a character's free time events, you're not going to get their underwear.
Yeah.
That is,
I mean,
so we won't be doing that.
Yeah.
in regards to everything else, it's like I said, I personally, and this is just my personal opinion, but I'm sure the same goes for the other writers, that we just want to emulate the best parts of DR without trying to seem full of ourselves or trying to assert ourselves as better, because we are just, we're all really young. We're still, I think, relatively new to writing. Even if we've been writing for years now, we're super young. We have a lot to learn. And even when I look back on the prologue, I'm like, I wish that line was written differently, or I wish we did this differently. And I think the reason this project has come so far is because it's not working out of spite, or it's not working to do better. It's just trying to be the best it can be.
We try to set a certain standard in terms of like our quality when it comes down to developing those chapters or games that we want to do in the future. But obviously, we're not perfect human beings and know everything inside and out. I mean, we had a lot of challenges that we had to combat, and even had to go with some compromises in order to not destroy some certain aspects of Project Eden's Garden. And I would like to preface that very much, because inevitably, when it comes down to technical stuff, we have to firstly see how feasible it is for us to develop that in the first place. So, yeah.
And going off that, I really hope that when the prologue comes out, that people feel confident. If people have any criticisms about literally anything, that they feel confident in voicing it. Because if people don't share their criticisms or their reviews, we can't improve. I'm glad that people are so excited for the game, but I also hope that they remain critical and not let, the excitement for the game sort of rule their feelings or their review of it.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty admirable way to think about it, because, obviously there are going to be a lot of people who would take things way more personally and no, I have to keep it this way, screw everybody else. Actually, that makes me think, I'm going to toss this one in here. As a curveball, surprise, for both of you.
Oh boy.
What's your favorite and least favorite minigame from any DR game ever?
Oh, you go first, Shade.
Oh my god. Okay, I really hate how they designed the DR2 Hangman's Gambit. Mainly because when I first played it, I was completely confused on what the hell was happening. And to realize that I have to take the letters together to combine them, and then actually press a different button to put that as a solution to one letter of it, was so confusing to me that I really didn't love that. And in terms of what my favorite one was, I would say, in terms visually, because it looked so cool and with the music and stuff, was the logic dive from New Danganronpa V3, I think, with the taxi.
Oh, uh-huh.
Yeah. This was it was so fun to play around it, and how it was styled, retro style and stuff like that. I really loved that.
I mean, for me, I've never actually had any particularly strong opinions on the mini games, because personally, I have more stronger opinions on characters and story and stuff like that. But I guess for mini games, I mean, I didn't have the greatest time with Hangman's Gambit and SDR2. So even though we do want to implement some new mini games, whether or not they're actually well done or well made is going to be up to the player. I guess I'm also going to say that I really like that the car mini game in V3. I just thought it was very cute, and I thought it was very fun, and I just like the mechanics of it.
Just TLDR, we just don't want to have another In the Meatbone incident.
Yeah.
We can't guarantee that. I'm saying that, but we cannot guarantee that.
We intend not to do
We
that.
intend not to, but like I said, you never know. You have to wait for feedback from the players. What might make sense to us when you put it out, a lot of people might be like, what the hell does this mean? And there's a lot of it so a lot of it has this almost this risk-taking factor that you won't really know how well it goes down until you send it off to the public.
Lastly, what do you hope people will end up taking away from the game when it's completely released?
I just hope that in the past 2 years that our hard work is being noticed, that how much like passion flew into this project, especially on like how much time has put into it, and of course a lot of like people in the community supported us regardless in the past 2 years, and I'm very, very thankful for them for motivating us to continue doing stuff like this. And when we hopefully fully develop the game, like have everything released, we just hope that we give the player a similar experience of the Danganronpa, of the Danganronpa games that made us love the franchise in the first place.
I mean, I want people to enjoy the game first and foremost, but similar to what Shade said, I want to be able to like give them the experience that the original DR games did. But I also want to show people that fan works and fan games are like worth investing time and energy into. I feel there is even now kind of like a stigma surrounding like fan games, and that you shouldn't put them on like a portfolio or professional work because, oh, it's a fan game, it's not professional. But I just disagree intensely. I think fan games are a perfect way to like find out more about yourself and your own skills. A perfect way to show your love for a series. And I just think fan works of all kinds are worthy of respect. And I just hope that Project Eden's Garden helps people see the value in fan works and maybe inspires them to make their own fan works for media they love.
Fundamentally, at the end of the day, you know, whether it's a fan project for something or a AAA game being made by a studio, you know, all of these things are inherently sort of collaborative, creative works that bring people together. And, you know, I think there's always value in that, and there's always something interesting to be gained out of it.
Like, in this interview, I have been a little critical of the Danganronpa community. I've mentioned that I think there is an expectation to sort of try and assert your dominance, if you will, over the Danganronpa franchise. But I also don't want people to come with the aspect that I look down on like other Danganronpas, because that's not the case at all. Danganronpas in general just require so much effort, be it like a game or like a video series. They require so much time and effort, and I think that's just really incredible and says a lot about every single person involved. And I think everyone who like works on a fan game, especially like a Danganronpa fan game, like I guess deserves to feel like validated in their efforts, and deserves to know that what they're creating is like very special and unique, and that every single fan game that has been created basically paves the way for future fan games. I feel like every single fan game that exists helps create like the culture and the community of the general like Danganronpa sphere, and that's why I just think they're so important, because I think they all carry their own weight and meaning.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if there's anything that we can take away from all of this, especially, it's just that the Danganronpa community is nothing if not extremely passionate.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes. And I would say even more passionate than some other communities, based on how like strict their spoiler territory is. So it's kind of like an advantage that we have.
I would keep it all for longer, but I do have other things that I have to attend to as well, so I'll probably start
wrapping up. This was really fun.
Here.
This is really enjoyable. I just want to say I really really enjoyed these questions. I thought they were really insightful. I just thought you were really great to talk to.
Oh, thank you.
You seem really smart and nice, and yeah, and it was a really big pleasure to talk to you. I'm really glad that our first interviewer was someone who's so insightful.
Well, thank you. That means a lot. Is there anything else either of you would like to say before we go?
Just saying that, like I said, thank you. A big thank you basically to the community still supporting us. And if you still have any questions regarding specific things that were unclear, you can check out on our Discord server and social media. We'll try our best to answer all of them. we also have like occasionally like Q&A sessions every time we do like a devlog. So if you have time to check that out as well, we would greatly appreciate it.
Support Project Eden's Garden. Go support Nezumi if you haven't already. And play the prologue when it comes out.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be fantastic.
Play the game when it comes out. It'll be a lot of fun.
Please.
I'll be doing it.
I'm
so-
begging you.
Well, I think that's probably as good a point as any for me to stop the recording, so thank you so much for answering my questions.
Bye.
And that's my video on the demo for Project Eden's Garden. Check it out for yourself, linked below with all of the project's socials. Thank you so much once again to the team for reaching out to me for my thoughts, giving me a chance to play the game early, and conducting such a pleasant interview with me. I had a lot of fun with this, and I am absolutely going to be keeping a close eye on this project in the future. If you like Danganronpa, you should do yourself a favor and do very much the same. And thank you for watching too! You can find ways to support me and all my socials down below as well, and without further ado, let me do the thing where I thank some of my patrons. Those patrons being Serena Midori, Shogun DX, Friend of Dracula, Ali Oliver, and Claire Meeboon. Thanks for tuning in everyone, and I'll see you very soon. Peace.